Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons, and I want to talk about this amazing occurrence at the end of 2023 in Dungeons & Dragons history, and that is the Dungeons & Dragons AI accusation. The Dungeons & Dragons AI accusation OSR Tetherball Bonk. And this was, 2023 was this year where the OSR and the indie TTRPG scene kind of ginned up a whole bunch of D&D crises to topple Dungeons & Dragons. None of them worked. They all seemed to just make Dungeons & Dragons stronger. And this last one was like a perfect example of social justice where, the OSR was like, Dungeons & Dragons is using AI art again. But this time it was a lie. there was no AI to be found, and the OSR wrongfully accused Nestor Osandin, the greatest Dungeons and Dragons artist who's ever lived, and frankly, the greatest artist that has ever lived in any time since the first cave woman, drew a painting on a cave wall. Nestor Osandin has defeated every single artist in human history, and in 2023. And I want to say, like, I am a presentorian of Dungeons and Dragons. I want to show not Dungeons and Dragons history to you, right? You need to understand Dungeons and Dragons history to understand its present, and its present is what matters, not its history. Right? What matters is its present, okay? And its present matters more than its history and more than its future. Let's celebrate the wins of now. And so what happened right now, this year, Dungeons & Dragons created the 21st century John Henry who lived. And that John Henry is Nestor Osandin. It's incredible. Nestor Osandin, because of the power of Dungeons & Dragons, in my humble opinion, has become the greatest human artist to ever live. And he has beaten the steam-powered drill, right? But unlike John Henry, he didn't have to die to do it. That's incredible. That is astounding, right? So this year, everybody was like, oh no, AI art is gonna, nobody will ever need a human artist again. And with one foul swoop, Nestor Osandin shut down all the noise and said, no, the best art in the world does not come from computers. The best art in the world comes from a perfect artist with a perfect patron. And Nestor Osandin defeating the steam-powered drill of AI art this year, but living, not dying, living, right? Like, the story of John Henry is this man who, when the trains were being built across America, there were these men, these mountain men, who would break rocks and drill. Who would drill in these railroad ties, right? But then they found an automated steam-powered drill that could just jam a railroad tie in much faster than a human could do it, right? So John Henry comes and he says, hey, I don't care about your steam powered drill that can drive in railroad ties, railroad stake, that could drive a stake into a railroad tie. I can do it faster and better. And he did. But the problem is the effort was so great, right, that he literally died, right, doing it. And in order to beat the machine, it killed him, right? And so Dungeons & Dragons has now brought in 2023 this incredible occurrence where we have the John Henry story again. We have one man going up against the machine, right? But the John Henry story, people forget, right? John Henry had a man with him who had set the spike, right? And that was extremely dangerous because John Henry had to be hitting so hard and so fast and so perfectly that this man who was helping him to put the spikes into the railroad ties at exactly the right time before his hammer would come down, right? Risking every one of his fingers, right? It had to be, it was a two-man job, right? Now the reality is the job of, setting the spike was much easier, right? And literally the job of driving in those spikes literally killed John Henry, right? But the reality is we now know, right? Nestor O'Sandin is John Henry, and the spike setter is Hasbro. It set the spikes. It went up, and and Nestor O'Sandin could never have beaten, the AI art creator without Hasbro. But Hasbro stepped forward and said, no, we're going to make this real. We're going to make it happen. And it did, right? And the reality is it set up this situation where Nestor O'Sandin was able to become the greatest, the greatest artist in all history. Like, even Michelangelo did nothing the likes of what Nestor O'Sandin did. And the statue of David has now been surpassed by the dwarf sword and board. That's the new Mona Lisa, right? Like, that is truly, like, this one piece of art will be heralded not in Dungeons and Dragons history, but in all history as the moment when AI art was defeated, and where the entire AI conversation changed. And they're like, because before Nestor O'Sandin came and drove in every railroad spike and defeated AI art and lived, right? Like, Nestor O'Sandin is the AI art, Nestor O'Sandin is the John Henry who lived, right? He defeated the machine, but didn't have to die to do it. And that is incredible. That is absolutely incredible. I just, it's truly astounding. But it could not have been done without that rail spike setter, right? Which was Hasbro. And Hasbro gave him the time, it gave him the money, it gave him the inspiration, it gave him the momentum to do this thing. And here's the kicker, right? AI art did not need to be defeated by a human artist who was better than the AI for the sake of Dungeons and Dragons. It needed to happen for the sake of humanity. And this is the part that is astounding. I've been telling you for 5 years that Dungeons and Dragons can change fundamentally the lives of every dungeon master and every dungeon performer, right? But what's new is Dungeons and Dragons is now breaking ground for humanity itself. It is creating wins for people who don't care about Dungeons and Dragons, right? There are many artists right now, right, who owe their livelihood, right, to Nestor O'Sandin. There are artists who did not know it was possible to make art so good people would not even think it could be created by a human being. And all that happened under the auspice of Hasbro Dungeons and Dragons. So I want to finish out this year saying thank you, Hasbro D&D. Thank you, Hasbro. Thank you, Dungeons and Dragons. Thank you, Nestor O'Sandin, for creating the John Henry who lived. Thank you for slaying the dragon of AI art and saying anybody who wants to commission and use AI art in any game they want to, in any product you want to, go right ahead. Put your crap art up. But if you want something good, if you want the best, you have to get a human. Nestor O'Sandin proved it. Bow down, AI artists. You have every right to create, but you will always be behind. And you got John Henry in 2023 because of Hasbro, because of Dungeons and Dragons, and because of Nestor O'Sandin, humanity's art champion. Every single word you just heard is my humble opinion. Nothing more, nothing less. What's important is when I hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.